All right, guys, welcome back to another episode of Live Wire. I'm your host, Jared Moore, and as usual, Live Wire is a program where we take your questions from the chat. Tonight, we're going to be talking about the new Netflix film Frybread Face and Me, and we have the director Billy Luther joining us, along with Pfeiffer Horwitz, who is with his what Pfeiffer? What are you doing? You do there? You're with the PR group, is that right?
Yes, we are Billy's publicists.
All right, great. So, Mr. Luther, thank you so much for joining us tonight.
Thank you for having me.
I guess to start off with, before we actually get into Frybread Face and Me, because you have listed here Dene or Navajo, Hopi, and Laguna Pueblo as your tribal affiliations, you want to give any shout outs to your tribal communities or talk a little bit about your tribal heritage to give the audience an idea of where you come from and what you're.
Sure, yeah. I am, all three of those tribes are Southwest tribes. And I've just grown up, within New Mexico, Arizona. Each tribe is very, very different from each other in terms of the three that I'm associated with, but so close. So, yeah, I grew up in California, so my summers would be spent in either New Mexico or Arizona, or sometimes both.
So you're kind of like going through all those cultures.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
So what was your journey to becoming a filmmaker like? Did you always want to be a filmmaker? Is it something that kind of like jumped up later? What was that process like for you?
I just always knew at an early age I loved telling stories. And when I probably was about 10 years old, I just knew exactly what I wanted to do. I wanted to work in television or in film. I wanted to write and direct. So I would borrow cameras and, VHS cameras and just with my neighborhood friends and, just go out and start filming things. So it just started as an early age. And, after high school, I went to film school in Chicago, and I've just been making films since then.
And what type of films have you been making up until this point? Because I know this is kind of like a narrative and would be safe to say a comedy. But have you always been in that genre, or is it new ground for you?
Yeah, my background is I guess I just started in documentaries, and the documentaries probably for the past 15 years all kind of had the topics of contemporary Native Americans, just because these were not the kind of films that I would watch growing up. So I was really interested. For instance, I've made a documentary about Miss Navajo, about the Miss Navajo Nation beauty pageant.
Mm-hmm.
And then I also worked with Bethany Yellowtail, who she is an indigenous fashion designer. So I really kind of liked a different perspective, different worldview on natives, like who you wouldn't think about. A fun one was following three indigenous chefs, going back to their roots, and kind of their culinary roots, I should say.
Mm-hmm.
And that was pretty fun to just explore that world with them.
So, and you also were part of the 2020 Sundance Institute Screenwriters Lab. Is that right? How did you get involved with the Sundance?
Yeah, with my background, I just I had to do a lot of kind of research and homework, which is not necessarily something that you're taught about in college or in film school. You can't just go out and write. I mean, you can, but it's you have to kind of understand and know the industry, and know that there are programs for whether you want to be a writer, a director, or in all aspects of filmmaking. So I really did my homework and found a place that could workshop a film that I had, written or wanted to write, Frybread, and really became a part of their program. I also was a part of Film Independent, which also has a screenwriting and directing lab. And those organizations really helped foster and just kind of give the support to my first feature.
Okay, and that did the Screenwriters Lab lead to your association with Taika Waititi as the producer, or like how did that happen? Because isn't that like the main thing for helping you get onto Netflix, or kind of could you talk a little bit about
Well,
his interaction with you?
yeah, I've known Taika for about 20 years. His connection for me, I mean, first off, myself, I had to tell a good story, I mean, Taika could have been a part of my film, but it could have been a really bad film.
Yeah,
So
right.
I've known Taika for 20 years. He's a really great friend, but also just collaborator in kind of the indigenous film community.
Mm-hmm.
And I just had this script and just asked if he could play a part in helping, support and produce. So that was helpful. Of course, he's working on multiple projects, so it wasn't like he was hands on every single day. I just had that support where we were able to secure investors, and all of that. So it was a very really it was a good partnership, but it was mostly a role that is as a producer where he just kind of gives you notes here and there, gives you
Mm-hmm.
kind of pointers here and there. So that's how it worked out. But Netflix happened because of Ava DuVernay. Her distribution company, Array, was our distributor on the project. So Ava and Array, had our gave a path to go to Netflix.
Awesome. So the Frybread script that you were talking about with the Screenwriters Lab, is that the same? Is that the script for Frybread Face and Me? Is that the same story?
Yes, yeah,
Okay.
that's the same story.
So tell the audience a little bit about Frybread Face and Me if they haven't seen it. Like what can they expect to see in the story?
Sure. Yeah, Frybread Face and Me is a coming of age story that follows a young boy, Benny, who's 11 years old, who is kind of an urban Indian, urban native, and who goes to the Navajo reservation, for one of his first times, not his first time, but kind of the first time that he remembers. And just kind of going through this summer, with a cousin who's nicknamed Frybread Face, kind of navigate their world between their aunts, their uncles, their family, but also just finding themselves and their search for identity and their connection to culture. So he befriends Frybread, who she's really connected to her community. She lives on the res. She speaks her language, and Benny is like this fish out of water. So the two of them navigate this summer together.
Awesome. And people can catch this on Netflix, and I'm assuming just general digital distribution. They could purchase it and stuff like that. Is it going to be? Has it had a theater run anywhere, or where could they catch it in a theater?
We've been on the festival run since South by Southwest. That's in Austin. We world premiered in March, and then also just been, traveling with the film festival. The great thing about being with Array as our distributor, they had a limited release in theaters as well as in conjunction with the Netflix. Right now, it's just solely on Netflix. You can't rent it or buy it anywhere else.
Okay.
It's solely a Netflix film.
And while we're talking about the film, one of my commenters has said, "Seen it? It's a great flick." That's Ty Pearl says, "Seen it? Great flick." And then he says, "Mado for sharing the culture ceremony around a baby's first laugh." So
That was a really special scene that we filmed. Many people don't necessarily know about the first laugh ceremony, and that was a pretty I don't know. I just felt that it was a great way to explore this culture, this community with the celebration of a baby's first laugh. And the film has a really great sense of humor. Yes, we touch on a lot of drama and conflict within the family, but yeah, I think first and foremost, it's a a joyful and humorous look inside the Navajo community.
absolutely. And I encourage everybody to check it out on Netflix. It's pretty cool. So what's your next project? Do you have anything coming up? Are you working on scripts? Like, where are you at right now?
Yeah, with the writer strike, it was a pretty dry spell, for about, I don't know how many months that was. I just right now, it just felt like it was forever. I write on the television series Dark Winds, which is on AMC. It's a Navajo cop drama.
Mm-hmm.
We're going into our third season. Direct on that show as well. So that's, we're working towards getting that third season written right now. And I'm also going back into my doc experience with the docu series about lacrosse, following a young team that's going to go out and try to win the national championship. So, yeah, just kind of playing the game, the Hollywood game, and
Right.
I think it's exciting. It's exciting.
We had a couple of questions here from Tulsi Town specifically about the movie. The first one is, what happened to Uncle Martin?
Oh, Martin Sensbauer plays Marvin. Yeah. That I really didn't want to hit and dive too directly into what that experience with Marvin. But our uncles, at the time, the film is set in the 90s. The experiences of the boarding schools that happened across the country, and also our men were coming back from Vietnam at the time.
Hmm.
So I don't want to necessarily highlight that kind of, but I just with that, I think you could come to your own conclusion. But yeah, I had uncles who went through both, and that was really traumatic for them. And it's just something that kind of gives a nod and honors our uncles that we've lost.
Okay, Tulsi Town's next question about the movie is, does Frybread Face ever leave the reservation?
The great thing about writing these characters is, they're not 100%, real people. Yes, it's loosely based on my life, but in my life, there was not a specific Frybread face in my life. It was a creation of this character that I wanted to go on this journey with Benny. And the same thing. I mean, I think if you know the character, you know that she stays put. She loves her land. She loves her community. So, yeah, I think this fictitious character would probably stay
All
and
right.
carry on the traditions of her grandmother.
All right. Tulsi Town has another question. How old is Benny the narrator reflecting back on that summer?
Oh, how old is he? Wow, probably mid 40s, I would guess, or maybe older. I think Benny, older Benny would look back. I don't think Benny could look back in his 20s and have that kind of same outlook on life. I think people have to go through different experiences as they grow up to really make sense and understand what was going on with family and also themselves. So yeah, I would say about that age range.
Okay. T.Y. Prohl asks, the young actors who played Benny and Fry are great. Anything you'd like to share about them?
The actors were cast. We were filming and casting, or we're developing and filming during pandemic. So my casting process was done through Zoom. And so when we met each other for the first time a week before we started filming, we had to hope and pray that everything and everyone got along and had chemistry. Frybread, Charlie Hogan was our first actor cast. Charlie brought something so special, so unique to this character that, I mean, I wrote somebody, on script, on page, but Charlie brought it to life in the most beautiful way. And Benny, I really enjoyed kind of when I was getting to meet Benny and understand who he was, his shyness and the way he looked, the expressions that he had on his face, the curiosity. He was at that age where he was still discovering who he was. So those are kind of the reasons why I cast both of them.
All right. T.Y. Pearl asks, Are you the voice of the narrator?
Yes, I am.
All right, there you go, guys. There's the secret sauce. And I want to remind you guys, we are at about 15 minutes and we only have Mr. Luther for 30 minutes at the most. So if you got a question, pop it in there about Frybread Face or any of his other films. I wanted to ask you at this stage, is there any advice that you would want to give to independent Native filmmakers or Native kids that want to get into the film industry, about that process? Is there a place that you recommend they go, or people that you recommend they talk to? Anything for filmmakers who maybe haven't broken through or gotten any distribution?
Yeah, it's a extremely difficult career to take on. A lot of patience, a lot of rejections, a lot of no's. But you have to have this thick skin. You can't take things so personal. I mean, I have to admit myself, sometimes I take them personal, but you have to keep going. You have to, I mean, Frybread, wasn't easy to make. I had to go through several revisions of the film, and to get into those Sundance and Film Independent labs with the script. I was rejected a couple times with the script, but you have to keep going. So I had to rework and rewrite, and it's not, for the faint. It's very, very, very hard. And I think if anybody is interested in makeup, in hair, in wardrobe, art department, those are roles and crews that we need in film. Yes, people think of the sexy aspect of it as writing and directing and acting, but there's other aspects of this, the world of film, cinema, editing, for instance, composing. We need natives to be in those roles, and sometimes those are overlooked because people want to be actors, writers, and directors. And what we were able to have on Frybread was crew, Navajo native crew, in every department that we had: camera and wardrobe and props and composing. And it made a huge difference because we weren't trying to make it right. We just knew the world that we were, creating. And that's what really made it. I have that more authentic look and feel.
Yeah, one of the things we're seeing here in Oklahoma with the 5 civilized tribes is those tribes trying to get into the film production, either through producing or starting their own film departments. As somebody who has a lot of experience in that world and what those productions need, what would you recommend to those tribal governments who are trying to support that industry and get their citizens into that industry in all the different places? Is it better, I guess my question would be, is it better for a tribe to produce or fund projects, or try to establish those facilities like ADR houses or equipment rental places and things like that to facilitate in areas like Oklahoma that doesn't have that stuff's not so prevalent?
Right. I think there's two things. I think that needs to be support for aspiring artists. These programs that I took part in, that I mentioned before, those are so critical in the development of artists. Being a production assistant is huge because that allows you to get on the set. Yeah. And yes, you have to work yourself up to whatever else you want to do, but you have to be on set to understand what goes into making a film. So I would say, fostering those who want to kind of have the experience and working as a production assistant is so helpful, extremely helpful. And then, I don't know. I mean, I think that would be a wonderful way if tribes could, invest in films. But, as I've known working with investors on Frybread Faces, a lot of these investors, are taking risks and chance because it's really hard to make your money back. It really is it's hard to, create this as, as a way to, I guess, get, like I said, get your money back and things. But I think what was great about Frybread is people loved the story and wanted to see this made. So.
All right. I want to remind you guys, we are at 20 minutes right now. So if you have any questions, pop them into the chat. Let me see here if there are any more questions. I don't see any questions. Is there anything about the project that we haven't talked about that you think is important that we definitely need to mention?
One of the, yeah, I really, a lot of the response that I'm getting is from the grandmother in the film, the grandmother's natural performance and how language plays a part in the film, the Navajo, the Dene language that she speaks, who only speaks, that was the experience that I had with my grandmother. My grandmother spoke only Navajo, and I was, coming from the city and only speaking English. So I really didn't have, the communication without having an interpreter. So I really wanted to go into that route and explore that experience that Benny had with his grandmother, with their communication or lack of communication. And I just felt that it was a wonderful look into language and indigenous cultures and yeah, I think. But yeah, awesome. That's kind of where I was at.
We had a question pop up here from Tulsi Town. They say, congrats on having your movie on Netflix. Amazing to see a native film on there. Any idea how many views or how well it has been doing?
Yeah, Netflix, it was in the top 10, and that's a really hard, difficult, it was number 4, which was really shocking to me. I think native social media played a great role in spreading the word. Cause we basically had $0 in advertising. We're such a small film. So getting, to be in the top 10 was huge for us. And I think that was really rewarding, not just for me, but for everybody who put their heart and soul into the film. And I don't know the numbers. Netflix doesn't necessarily give you the, it's not like television where you get Nielsen ratings, but I think for being in the top 10, that's pretty epic.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, for sure. Especially for a native film, which is even a smaller demographic of how many there are.
Right. And I mean, I just never seen, a native film be in the top 10 before, or a native made film in the top 10 before. So it just shows that, like I said, it was spreading through, social media, and I'm meeting people who are not native that have seen the film, and just so I think it spread between the communities, native and non.
Awesome. T.Y. Pearl's got a question here. Do you think tribes could use public educational and governmental channels to develop technical skills and abilities in media broadcasting, if not creative skills?
Yeah, I think Canada does a great job with that, with what they do. But like I said, I think many people just have to do, the research and homework. I mean, there are programs out there that many people do not know. And I mean, I could sit here and list, for a long time, but it's up to the individual. And that's exactly what I did. And I couldn't afford film school, so I didn't finish film school. But what I did was I started volunteering at film festivals, Sundance being one of them. And, as you volunteer there, you meet people, as you network. I would see films for free because as, incentive when you volunteer at film festivals, you get to see films, they give you tickets for it, as a thank you. And I would stay for the Q&As and listen to the filmmakers' process of making movies and writing it. And I'd be, going to panels and listening to producers and composers talk about the film and their creative process. So I did what I could. And I think that it's just something that many people don't think about. They just want to go straight to, the film school. That's great, but there's a lot more to do than just that.
Absolutely. Well, I want to thank you for being on the program tonight. I don't see any questions popping up, and we're getting close to 30 minutes. Um, Going into the future, are you going to continue to do native projects, or are you going to try to branch out and do projects that are just, not concerned with native communities as the forefront as your previous projects have been? Or is this like a, because I know there's kind of a theme with your work about being kind of disassociated from your culture that you're in, like being an outsider inside of your own community. Could you talk a little bit about that before we wrap?
Yeah. Yeah, I like to go out and dive into worlds that are, not necessarily all Native American content. I just love telling stories. And I think for me to be attached to something, I really have to connect to the material. I think what the past work that I've done has always been very personal. And diving into, for instance, my first documentary, Miss Navajo, that was personal to me because that's my mother, ran for Miss Navajo in the 60s. So, yeah, I love telling these stories. I love, it's a world that I know well, being multi-tribal. But yeah, if I can, work outside of that, and then, just I don't want to stick with just one thing, one genre, one, you know, topic. I just want to tell a story and hopefully tell it right.
All right. Well, thank you, Mr. Luther, for joining me tonight. Guys, just to catch you up on stuff that's coming up this week on our channel, tomorrow we're going to have the update from day 2 of Travis Scott's trial. We are also going to have the directors from the Bad Press documentary come on and talk about their new push to try to get an Oscar nomination, a DIY push that they're doing, and also talk about the year that they've had on the festival circuit. And then on Wednesday on Ebonaya, Gary Fife's show, he's going to have some folks on to talk about the boarding schools. So keep a lookout for all those live streams, and we'll see you guys again. Badoo, Adam, Chihichathlis.